A leitmotif is a short, constantly recurring musical phrase associated with a particular person, place, or idea. It is closely related to the musical concepts of idée, ɛlaɪtmoʊʻtiːf, fixe or motto theme. The term itself is an anglicization of the German Leitmotif, literally meaning leading motif, or perhaps more accurately, guiding motif. A musical motif has been defined as a short musical idea. Melodic, harmonic, or rhythmic, or all three, a salient recurring figure, musical fragment or succession of notes that has some special importance and/or is characteristic of a composition, the smallest structural unit possessing thematic identity. In particular, such a motif should be clearly identified so as to retain its identity if modified on subsequent appearances, whether such modification be in terms of rhythm, harmony, orchestration or accompaniment. It may also be combined with other leitmotifs to suggest a new dramatic condition, or development. The technique is notably associated with the operas of Richard Wagner, although he was not its originator and did not employ the word in connection with his work. Although usually a short melody, it can also be a chord progression or even a simple rhythm. Leitmotifs can help to bind a work together into a coherent whole, and also enable the composer to relate a story without the use of words, or to add an extra level to an already present story. By association, the word has also been used to mean any sort of recurring theme, in literature, or the life of a fictional character or a real person. It is sometimes also used in discussion of other musical genres, such as instrumental pieces, cinema, and video game music, sometimes interchangeably with the more general category of theme. Such usage typically obscures the crucial aspect of a leitmotif as opposed to the plain musical motif or theme that it is transformable and recurs in different guises throughout the piece in which it occurs. Classical music. Early instances in classical music, the use of characteristic, short, recurring motifs in orchestral music can be traced back to the late 18th century. In French opera of this period, reminiscence motifs can be identified, which may recur at a significant juncture in the plot to establish an association with earlier events. Their use, however, is not extensive or systematic. The power of the technique was exploited early in the 19th century by composers of romantic opera, such as Carl Maria von Weber, where recurring themes or ideas were sometimes used in association with specific characters. Indeed, the first use of the word leitmotif in print was by the critic Friedrich Wilhelm Jahn-Chns in describing Weber's work, although this was not until 1871. Motifs also figured occasionally in purely instrumental music of the Romantic period. The related idea of the musical idée ɛlaɪtmoʊʻtiːf fixe was coined by Hector Berlioz in reference to his symphony Fantastique. This purely instrumental, programmatic work features a recurring melody representing the object of the artist's obsessive affection and depicting her presence in various real and imagined situations. Wagner. Richard Wagner is the earliest composer most specifically associated with the concept of leitmotif. His cycle of 4 operas, Der Ring des Nibelungen, uses hundreds of leitmotifs, often related to specific characters, things, or situations. While some of these leitmotifs occur in only one of the operas, many recur throughout the entire cycle. Wagner had raised the issue of how music could best unite disparate elements of the plot of a music drama in his essay Opera and Drama. The leitmotif technique corresponds to this ideal. Some controversy surrounded the use of the word in Wagner's own circle. Wagner never authorized the use of the word leitmotif, using words such as Grundthema, or simply motif. His preferred name for the technique was Hauptmotiv, which he first used in 1877. The only time he used the word leitmotif, he referred to so-called leitmotifs. The word gained currency with the overly literal interpretations of Wagner's music by Hans von Waltzigen, who in 1876 published a Leitfaden to the Ring. In it he claimed to have isolated and named all of the recurring motifs in the cycle, often leading to absurdities or contradictions with Wagner's actual practice. Some of the motifs he identified began to appear in the published musical scores of the operas, arousing Wagner's annoyance. His wife Cosima Wagner quoted him as saying, "People will think all this nonsense is done at my request." In fact, Wagner himself never publicly named any of his leitmotifs, preferring to emphasize their flexibility of association, role in the musical form, and emotional effect. The practice of naming leitmotifs nevertheless continued, featuring in the work of prominent Wagnerian critics Ernest Newman, Dwight Cook and Robert Donington. The resulting lists of leitmotifs also attracted the ridicule of anti-Wagnerian critics and composers. They identified the motif with Wagner's own approach to composing, mocking the impression of a musical address book, or list of cloakroom numbers it created. After Wagner. Since Wagner, the use of leitmotifs has been taken up by many other composers. Richard Strauss used the device in many of his operas and several of his symphonic poems. Despite his sometimes acerbic comments on Wagner, Claude Debussy utilized leitmotifs in his opera Pella copyright as A mar copyright Lisand. Arnold Schoenberg used a complex set of leitmotifs in his choral work Göri Lieder. Alban Berg's opera Wozzeck also utilizes leitmotifs. Critique of the leitmotif concept. The critic Theodore W. Adorno, in his book In Search of Wagner, expresses the opinion that the entire concept of the leitmotif is flawed. The motif cannot be both the bearer of expression and a musical gesture, because that reduces emotional content to a mechanical process. He notes that even in Wagner's own day the public made a crude link between the leitmotifs and the persons they characterized because people's innate mental processes did not necessarily correspond with Wagner's subtle intentions or optimistic expectations. He continues. The degeneration of the leitmotif is implicit in these. It leads directly to cinema music where the sole function of the leitmotif is to announce heroes or situations so as to allow the audience to orient itself more easily. Film music, leitmotifs in Adorno's degenerated sense frequently occur in film scores, and have since the early decades of sound film. Erich Wolfgang Korngold's 1938 score for The Adventures of Robin Hood, for example, can be heard to attach particular themes and harmonies to individual characters. Robin, Will, Much, and Gisborne are all accompanied by distinctive musical material. A more modern example is the Star Wars series, in which composer John Williams uses a large number of themes specifically associated with people and concepts. In the film trilogy Lord of the Rings, the dramatic orchestral score has hundreds of leitmotifs recurring throughout. Literature and drama. Leitmotif is sometimes used by literary or dramatic critics to refer to a recurring event, image, object or character in a story, poem, film or play. Leitmotifs become significant to the meaning of the overall work when they develop thematic importance. In film, such a motif is most frequently a plot device, image, character trait, or element of the mise en scène. Leitmotif-like techniques, with word patterns replacing melodies, are said to be used in Ulysses by James Joyce. Leitmotifs are also said to be present in Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, as well as in the works of Samuel Beckett, Virginia Woolf, Kurt Vonnegut, Joseph Heller, Thomas Mann, Chuck Palahniuk, and Julian Barnes, among several other writers. See also, image song, motif, 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 ostinato, theme music, references. Sources and further reading, Theodore Adorno, Tr. Rodney Livingston, In Search of Wagner, London 2005, Peter Burbage and Richard Sutton, The Wagner Companion, London, 1979. ISBN 0-571-11450-4, R. Donington, Wagner's Ring and Its Symbols, London, 1979, William Drabkin, Motif, in New Grove Dictionary of Music, London 1995, Volume 12, Donald J. Grout and Herman Wiggle Williams. A Short History of Opera. Columbia University Press. ISBN 0-231-11958-5 Hours Rosenthal and J. Warwick, Concise Oxford Dictionary of Opera, Oxford 1979, Michael Kennedy, The Concise Oxford Dictionary of Music, Oxford, 1987. ISBN 978-0-19-311320-6. Barry Millington, The Wagner Compendium, London 1992, Alexander Reading, Review of Christian Thoreau, Semantisiertssinnlichkeit, Study in zur Rezeption und sich Instruktor der Leitmotivtechnik Richard Wagner's in Opera Quarterly Volume 23 ppA 348 Euro 351, Christian Thoreau, Guides for Wagnerites, Leitmotifs and Wagnerian Listening, Integre Richard Wagner and His World, Princeton 2009 ISBN 978-0-691-14366-8, Cosima Wagner, T.R. Geoffrey Skelton, Cosima Wagner's Diaries, London 1980. John Warwick, Leitmotif, in New Grove Dictionary of Music, London 1995, Volume 10, John D. White, The Analysis of Music. ISBN 0-13-033233-X.